on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:06 Monday morning. Thanks for tuning in here to O'Connor and Company. Coming up at 6:35, Carrie Lucas is the president of Independent Women's Forum. Check in with her on the state of this race, this campaign, and the Olympics and the definition of women. I think she can help us out with that. At 7:05, Joe DeGenevo will be here. At 7:35, Sean Parnell. He was a rally goer there during the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. We'll talk to him about the latest on the Secret Service scandal. At 8:05, Scott Pressler, activist. Get out the vote efforts are absolutely steamrolling through Pennsylvania, and we love Scott. And then at 8:35, Matt Bonesteel will give us a wrap-up on the Olympics in Paris. It's Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock. And gosh, Julie, we've been pointing out the fact that Kamala Harris has no policies laid out on her website. We keep saying, she stands for nothing. They're selling you a product. They won't even tell you what they're going to do when they become president. You go to the website. Still, there is no breakdown of actually what she plans to do should she be president. So she says these things at these rallies, and it's like, what are you talking about? You'll get tough on the border. You're literally the borders are. You're running against Joe Biden, it sounds like. I'll bring down prices. What are you talking about? You'll bring down prices. What have you done for 3.5 years? But finally, we had a new initiative. Finally, over the weekend, in Las Vegas, she came out with a bold new statement about a bold new policy. Here's Kamala Harris with a bold new position that she has said. We've never heard her articulate this before, but she came out with it. It was a big deal.
And eliminate taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers.
Hospitality workers. Now, of course, I think she meant hospitality workers. I think. I should assume that she meant hospitality workers, but of course she's not used to saying eliminate taxes on waiters and hospitality workers because, well, this is a brand new thing for her. She would never dream of it. Of course, she's a Democrat. She would never dream of eliminating taxes on anybody. In fact, they've done quite the opposite. So once again, I think it's hospitality workers. You can understand why she would stumble over it.
And eliminate taxes on tips for service and hospitality workers.
But make no mistake, it's a brand new policy for her. She's announced it, and good for her. Of course, to the keen observer who may be following these things on a regular basis, you would recognize that it happens to be Donald Trump's position. This is something that Donald Trump actually introduced and articulated many months ago when he was in Las Vegas. It was very popular. People have been writing on bills, on checks at the restaurants they go to, vote for Trump and eliminate taxes on tips. It sort of caught fire, became viral. He's been leading in the polls in Las Vegas ever since, or in Nevada, I should say, but really Las Vegas is the only city or county, Clark County, that matters in Nevada. So one suspects that since she was just in Las Vegas, she made a deal with the devil, got the endorsement from the union there in exchange for her glomming onto this policy of Donald Trump's, and the shamelessness with which this has been embraced and celebrated is, well, more than we're used to seeing. And that's saying something because they have no shame, the left, the Democrats. USA Today's announcement today on it is extraordinary. They've said that Kamala Harris joins Trump in embracing elimination on taxes.
Yeah,
she joined him.
It shouldn't surprise us. I mean, after the slobbering we've seen this weekend, and the tough questions that J.D. Vance had to take, absolutely no economic policy proposals on her website, nothing, and she's getting away with it. And then she literally copies Trump's no taxing on tips, and everyone's like, what a great idea. We shouldn't be surprised. I don't know at what point I stopped being surprised at the audacity of this, but yeah, I was surprised too.
Yeah, I mean, listen, whether this works in terms of her getting the votes or not, I mean, here's what everyone must reconcile. Do you believe this woman? Is there any reason to believe this woman? I mean, she literally was the deciding vote in the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, which, of course, did not reduce inflation. But what it did do is hire an army of over 80,000 new IRS agents. And part of the new IRS mandate ushered in under the Biden administration, I'll read it from the IRS's website, dated February 6, 2023. IRS introduces new service industry tip reporting program. They created a more robust system to report tips so that revenue can be taxed.
Yep.
That's what she did as vice president in the Biden-Harris administration, but now she wants to eliminate those taxes. And, of course, it's just an applause line at a rally that's been written on a teleprompter script for her to read, but no one has pressed her on, well, so now why do you think this is a good idea? What exactly is going to happen to revenue? I mean, because obviously you wanted this revenue. You were planning on this for your budgetary purposes, so now how are you going to offset that? You have always articulated that cutting taxes doesn't help grow the economy, so you think it hurts the economy. So isn't this going to hurt the economy? Why are you just picking this sector? Why this, why that, why that, why that? No, of course not. No challenges, no questions, no expectations to announce or explain the policy. It's just, hey, me too. Well, she is part of the Me Too movement, so there you go.
Right, but that is a good point, Larry. Like, what have you identified in this particular demographic that needs this sort of relief?
Votes.
And why do they need that? Well, of course. But the point is, she doesn't have to explain anything. Nobody. She comes out with this new policy, and well, that's great. But she's not required to explain it at all. But you're right; it is votes.
If you remember right, it was months ago. Here's Donald Trump in cut 2 here, if you could, Jeffrey. Professor, thank you. Cut 2 is Donald Trump articulating this policy, and of course he's repeating it at every rally he's done since then.
Tax on tips.
Oh, I'm guessing that was at the press conference last week. I apologize. Otherwise, you would have heard a huge reaction from the crowd.
Right. And you mentioned there are a number of Trump surrogates who have actually said when you go out to eat, write this on your bill. So that, I mean, this has been a part of the Trump campaign for a long time. And now the media is acting like Kamala came up with the idea.
Well, if Kamala Harris had to actually sit down and answer questions, or even stand up and answer questions at a press conference, I would think that would be one of the. Of course, most of the questions will be. Trump said that you're a DEI hire. How do you reply?
Yeah.
It's going to be garbage like that. But I think it's important to ask Kamala Harris at this point. You have said that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy itself. You have said that Donald Trump is a fascist. You have said that Donald Trump must be stopped at all costs. You have said that Donald Trump will ruin our nation. You have basically walked right up to the line, if not crossed the line, you and your party, in calling Donald Trump the second coming of Hitler. So can you please explain to me how you're embracing Hitler's tax policy on tips? You're telling me that Trump is Hitler, but you do like that one sort of economic idea that Hitler has.
Right.
Even Hitler was right on a couple of items, I guess, is what Kamala's saying. He did make the trains run on time.
That's right.
Donald Trump took to Truth Social and said Kamala Harris, whose honeymoon period is ending, I think that's wishful thinking, and is starting to get hammered in the polls, just copied my no taxes on tips policy. The difference is she won't do it. She just wants it for political purposes. This was a Trump idea. She has no ideas. She can only steal from me. Remember, Kamala proposed the largest tax increase in history. It won't happen. Make America great again. And he's right. That's the thing. The bottom line is, who do you trust? And is there any reason to trust Kamala Harris on this? The answer is no. 5:15. WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes, first on the fives. Jamie Whitten's in the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center.
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
So that's Kamala Harris stealing, absolutely copying, and without any attribution, by the way. That would have been a great moment, if I may, when she said, and I would like to just take this moment to acknowledge one good idea that I disagree with Donald Trump on a lot of things, but we agree on this. That kind of thing.
Right.
No,
never gonna happen.
But she pretended like it was her idea.
Yep.
It's just gross.
It is gross, but they seem very comfortable with lying.
Because they know no one will call them out on it except us.
Right.
And center-right media, right-wing media, conservative media, real media, true media.
Fair media.
And then there's the major decision. She's made one huge decision.
Wow.
It's the biggest decision that any candidate for president ever needs to make. It's who the running mate's going to be. And it tells you everything you need to know about their judgment, their wisdom, their decision-making process, their attention to detail. It's very revealing about what kind of president they'll be. And she picked this simmering cauldron of rage, Tim Walz, because he wears flannel shirts, and she thinks that he's, folksy.
And he's got a dad bod.
And there's what's wrong with that?
Go ahead.
Did you do that?
Keep going. I interrupted you. I distracted you.
And there was no vetting involved, clearly, in his military record, because he has said his entire career, in fact, it's still printed on some of his congressional website paraphernalia. It was on his challenge coin that he retired as a command sergeant major. And his retirement papers that he got from the military, which every person in the military sees, shows that he was an E8. So, by the way, which is fine. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Man served 24 years and retired as a master sergeant, but he continues to call himself a command sergeant major. He was not a command sergeant major. He was a master sergeant.
The difference is important. Command sergeant major, and Larry, I am not in the military. You have much more sort of with your family, but
not much more.
Doesn't command sergeant major mean that you have gone into the field and have served in combat?
Not necessarily, no.
Oh, no, it doesn't. Okay.
It's a rank. It's a rank. It's like saying you're a 4-star general instead of a 2-star general, sort of.
Okay.
Kind of like that. It's like saying...
But he didn't go through the steps.
He did not. He had reached the point
command.
where he got the stripe, or he got the... It's actually an insignia that's part of the stripes. But contingent with that is you have to go through an entire program before you actually achieve the full rank and retire at that rank. He did not. He decided to drop out. There's 3 things in question here. One, that he lied about being in combat. The Harris campaign has already admitted that.
Yep.
They've said he misspoke when he said he carried a weapon in war. Misspoke. He misspoke several times, apparently.
Yeah.
That's only one thing, though. Lying and saying that he served in combat, which he did multiple times. Number 2, that he's lying about his rank because he did not retire as a command sergeant major. He retired as a sergeant
major.
Master sergeant.
Master sergeant, okay.
And number 3, the fact that he initially said that even though he was running for Congress, he got the notice that he was going to deploy, and he planned on deploying. And then he decided to change his mind and stay back and let the men that he trained go and serve in Iraq while he stayed back in Minnesota and ran for Congress. And he's lied about that, too.
Yeah, he claimed he didn't know.
Now they're saying he didn't know, even though his campaign put out a press release contemporaneously at the time saying, yeah, he's been deployed, or he will be deployed, but he still plans on running. So he's lying about that, too. It's the lies is the problem. And, of course, all they can do is say, how dare you question his record? Or they say, well, can't we just say that both Lance Corporal Vance and Master Sergeant Walz gave great service, one 24 years, one much less, J.D. Vance. But that's okay. Neither of them saw combat. That's the best that they can do right now. But no, the difference is J.D. Vance has not lied about his service. J.D. Vance did not blow up his and inflate his rank. J.D. Vance did not decide not to go to Iraq when his platoon was called up for Iraq. And here's the bottom line here, as everybody tries to lie and provide cover for Mr. Walz. He not only has his direct commanding sergeant, I'm sorry, forgive me for not giving you the rank of the person, his direct superior, let's say, who is a command sergeant major. His direct superior has said, oh no, this is what happened. He absolutely decided at the last minute to pull out and not go with us to Iraq, and we felt betrayed by it. All right. His battalion commander has said, no, absolutely. He pulled out. He told us he was going to go to Iraq with us, and then at the last minute he pulled out. And by the way, he had to jump 2 ranks above him to get permission to leave. He didn't ask his direct commander or his battalion commander. He had to go above their heads by 2 levels to ask for permission from someone who wasn't really involved and didn't know exactly. He said, oh, sure, you served 24 years. Yeah, you can retire. Anyone else would have said, hell no, you got to come with us. But now get this. It's not just his direct superior. It's not just his battalion commander. His chaplain, Julie.
My God.
The chaplain. Do you know what kind of jerk you have to be to have a chaplain speak out against you?
This is not something a chaplain wants to do. This is not something.
Captain Corey Biertness, now a pastor in Horace, North Dakota, was the chaplain for the unit that Tim Walz was assigned to.
Wow.
And he said, in our world, to drop out after a warn order, that's a warning order saying, hey, warning, you guys are going to be deployed in 6 months, okay? Mm-hmm. In our world, to drop out after a warn order is issued is cowardly, especially for a senior enlisted guy. Captain Corey Biertness, the pastor, the man of the cloth, the minister, calls Tim Walz cowardly for this. And yet there seems to be no questioning going on here. You know, you see these reporters following them around on the campaign trail. Why are reporters even going on the campaign plane with them? What's the point of spending money to go with this campaign when they're not going to answer any questions?
That's right. Right.
Like, oh, here's a picture of Tim Walz getting a selfie in an elementary school room with Kamala Harris. It's like, that's what Politico is paying you for? To let us know that he just took a selfie?
And yet the media continues to cover for him. There is, thank goodness.
Oh, there's joy in this campaign.
Well,
Look at
and
the
you
joy.
and I mean, simultaneously, you have CNN. I know that this happened last week, but you have CNN reporters like Breonna Keller who are actually questioning Vance's service and making these snide comments.
Yeah, he was just a public information officer.
Just a public information, which was it just is astonishing. You question one thing about Walz and you're, a terrible person, and yet they can do the same for JT. It's wild.
Well, that's the latest over the weekend on the campaign trail. We've got more this morning, of course, but just wanted to get you up to speed on the lie in media and Kamala Harris stealing the policy from Trump, and Tim Walz's chaplain calling him a coward. Everything's great. It's 5:24.
Making sense of your world.
Thank you for your clear insight.
News Talk 105.9 WMAL.
This is a major wake-up call.
Making sense of the news. Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:36 Monday morning. Thanks for tuning in. At 6:35, Carrie Lucas, president of Independent Women's Forum, will be our guest. 7:05, Joe DeGeneva. 7:35, Sean Parnell, the latest on the assassination attempt of Donald Trump. At 8:05, Scott Pressler, the latest on registration efforts in Pennsylvania and across the Midwest. And at 8:35, Matt Bonesteel, sports reporter, will give us a wrap-up of the Olympics. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock.
Good morning.
Good morning, Julie. Kamala Harris over the weekend. Take a listen to this. It's cut 3. Another bold statement she's making on the campaign trail.
I was Attorney General of a border state. I went after the transnational gangs, the drug cartels, and human traffickers. I prosecuted them in case after case, and I won. We know our immigration system is broken, and we know what it takes to fix it. Comprehensive reform.
There we go.
That includes strong border security and an earned pathway to citizenship.
Yeah, we hear this all the time. It's broken, it's broken. Here's how we fix it. Give everyone who broke the law amnesty. Here she is, cut 4, explaining exactly how much amnesty she wants.
I intend to fight for a state that has the largest number of immigrants, documented and undocumented, of any state in this country, and do everything we can to bring them justice and dignity and fairness under the law and pass comprehensive immigration reform. Bring them out from under the shadows.
And so make no mistake, she's using rhetoric like, I'm going to get tough on border security, which, of course, what is she running as the border czar again? I can't keep it straight here. Is she or isn't she the border czar?
Yeah.
But her plan, that was her in Arizona, by the way, talking about getting tough on the border. But, of course, it's lies. It continues to be lies over and over again. It's lies. And But this is, again, her way to sort of mitigate differences between herself and Trump, I suppose. But I don't know anyone who would buy this.
Well, I actually feel like there are people who will buy this because there are people who don't understand. And I don't mean that to be dismissive of voters, but I do really think that there are voters who don't understand the difference between a strong border and the way that she talks about it, which is immigration reform. We need comprehensive immigration reform is code for just bringing everybody in, keeping an open border, giving them citizenship, registering them to vote. Of course, that's what she's talking about. She's not talking. We talk about a broken immigration system. No, we have a broken border. You need to stop the flow over the southern border first. And so I do think some voters, when they hear this, when they hear her say, we have a broken immigration system, we need comprehensive immigration reform, they think of that as, oh, that's wanting a strong border. That's not wanting a strong border. The only thing you need to be talking about right now is the border. So I do think this is an effective messaging. It's a lie, and it's really trying to fool the American public into thinking that she cares about the border, but it's not. I do think that some people have trouble understanding that she's conflating the two issues. These are two very separate issues. Yeah. But when people hear her say things like immigration reform, they think she's talking about the border. She's not. And I said that's a lie. Actually, I guess it's not really a lie. She has no intention of strengthening the border. No, she doesn't. And here's the interesting thing. We keep saying that she hasn't sat down for any interviews. She says she's going to do one interview by the end of the month. That's really remarkable, actually. Yeah. J.D. Vance did several interviews over the weekend, including one with Jonathan Karl, and the question of the border came up. I want you to listen to how Jonathan Karl challenged J.D. Vance on the Trump policy and compare and contrast this to the fact that, first of all, Kamala Harris hasn't answered any questions, let alone how a reporter might treat Kamala Harris if this issue comes up.
Well, John, we have to start with the fact that we have a wide open southern border because our border czar actually set a lot of open border policies. They suspended.
She wasn't the border czar.
Oh, that was what the media called her. She assumed the title. She had control over a lot of our border policy at a time when they were suspending. Let me finish, John. The time they were.
All right, so first you get the interruption there. Well,
right,
she wasn't really the border czar, right? And there's more to this, and we'll get to it in a moment. But I do like the fact that it's the whole, she wasn't really the border czar. Let's just put that in perspective here. Here's Jonathan Karl last year talking about Kamala Harris.
Back in 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago, that the president put Vice President Kamala Harris in playing a critical role in terms of trying to stop the flow of migrants across the border. I mean, she was more than 2 years ago. She got this responsibility. No, she's not actually. She wasn't the border czar.
Yeah, she wasn't actually the border czar.
Yeah, so that was
last year. Jonathan Karl himself went on and on about how she was in charge of slowing the flow of migrants across the border. Yeah, now when he's interviewing J.D. Vance, she wasn't really the border czar.
They actually called her the border czar. That was Kamala Harris, the border czar. It is remarkable. And, honestly, I know we're going to probably talk about this a little bit later, but J.D. Vance did, all the major morning shows. He did a ton of media, and he was excellent. He did a great job. But there was one thing that Trump does that I wish J.D. Vance would adopt a little bit. I wish J.D. Vance had said to John Karl, are you working for Kamala? Are you working for the campaign? Because this is an in-kind contribution. Really, you are literally using her talking points. This is not an interview. Yeah. You are advocating for her.
Right. It is. When a Republican sits down for an interview, it's actually engaging in a debate with a well-spoken advocate for the Democrat politician. That's how it works. And as I mentioned, when a Democrat sits down for an interview, it's really tantamount to a full-body massage. We're going to get into a little bit more here with J.D. Vance and Jonathan Karl, because then what really comes out here, as you'll hear from Jonathan Karl, is challenging the policies of the Trump administration in a way that, again, is carrying the water for Kamala Harris, because he says, we have to start deporting people who are here illegally. And the only thing John Karl has is, well, how are you going to do that?
Yeah.
How are you going to do that? It's like, wow, that I want to explore that notion in just a moment.
WMAL, making sense of mainstream media because the double standard is real. Download the WMAL app to stream us for free.
Okay, Senator J.D. Vance, the vice presidential nominee for the Republicans, with Jonathan Carlin this week, ABC News. Take a listen to this exchange about the policy of, enforcing the law as stated. Before I venture into this, I just want you to hear this. This becomes a big dust-up about deporting illegal immigrants in this country. The law of the United States of America, when the president and the vice president get sworn into office, they swear to protect and defend the Constitution, obviously, and their job is to enforce the laws that Congress has passed, right?
Yeah.
Execute the laws, carry out the laws. That's what happens. The legislative branch debates and passes law. The executive branch executes the law. Mm-hmm. The law in the United States right now is that if you are in this country illegally, you're eligible for deportation. Now, there is judgment used sometimes whether you get deported or not. At the very least, let's start with the felons, right? You break the law, you leave. You're working here illegally, you leave. We deport you. That's what the law is, that the president and the vice president are to deport illegal aliens in this country, period. That's the law.
Yep.
Now listen to this exchange and how contentious it gets over the Trump campaign promise to merely enforce the law.
Right.
To merely do the bare minimum of what a president is supposed to do when elected, enforce the law.
Well, John, we have to start with the fact that we have a wide open southern border because our border czar actually set a lot of open border policies. They suspended.
She's not actually. She wasn't the border czar.
Oh, that was what the media called her. She assumed the title. She had control over a lot of our border policy at a time when they were suspending. Let me finish, John. The time they were suspending deportations, they stopped Donald Trump's Remain in Mexico policy, and they reinstituted catch and release. They basically threw open the gates of our country, and now we have a ton of fentanyl, a ton of people suffering.
But how are you going to get 10 to 15 to 20 million people
Well,
out
the
of
first
country?
thing you have to do is to stop the bleeding, stop the open border, get Kamala Harris out of there, and actually re-implement the Remain in Mexico policy, rebuild or finish Donald Trump's border wall, and you do that and you stop the bleeding. Now, you're right. Once you do that, once you stop Kamala Harris's open border policies, you've got to do something with the people who are already here. And I think that you take a sequential approach to it. You are going to have to deport some people. If you're not willing to deport a lot of people, you're not willing to have a border when there are 20 million illegal aliens in our country.
10 to 15 million people, this is like,
Well, John, I think it's the wrong attitude to take of it. Okay,
so you go knock on doors and ask people for their papers.
Again, but I think this is the wrong attitude towards it, right? There's 20 million people here illegally. You start with what's achievable. You do that, and then you go on to what's achievable from there. I think that if you deport a lot of violent criminals, and frankly, if you make it harder to hire illegal labor, which undercuts the wages of American workers, I think you go a lot of the way to solving the illegal immigration problem. But look, President Trump is absolutely right. You cannot have a border unless you're willing to deport some people. I think it's interesting that people focus on, well, how do you deport 18 million people? Let's start with 1 million. That's where Kamala Harris has failed, and then we can go from there. Well, John,
Yeah, he's so good at laying this out. The interesting thing about Kamala talking in Arizona and saying, if I'm elected, I'm going to do this. She's essentially the president right now, right? I mean, she is in office right now. She is the vice president, and and we haven't seen the president. He was asleep on some Delaware beach this weekend. She could implement these things now. Why is she waiting? Why is she waiting to be elected? I mean, if you want this harder, harsher, tougher border security, do it. Don't wait. Right?
Well, because she doesn't want it, and again, it's comprehensive immigration reform means give me a supermajority in the House and the Senate of Democrats, and then I'll give amnesty and anything that I want.
Right.
This is the whole idea of how are you going to deport all these people is such a despicable lie of a question. And the only, he gave a pretty good answer. It says, let's start with the felons and maybe the first million. Here's how you do it. How do we deport 15 million people? One at a time.
I also, if it was, he sort of was interrupting J.D. Vance there, but you could hear, goes, what are you going to go house to house and knock on the doors and ask for their papers? Right. He was, of course, invoking some sort of German, image of, going house to house,
right? Now, it's like
on doors.
It's as if he had said, "What are you going to do when they come and apply for a job? You're going to make them show your papers." Well, actually, that's the law right now.
Yes, actually,
that's the law right now. And when they apply for a job and they have no documentation for their I-9 form, which every single legal employee in America has to fill out.
Yeah, but,
or if they present false documentation, they're deported.
But
Thanks.
he didn't
Thanks
say
for
that.
playing.
No, but he didn't say that. I know. I get it. But
he evoked the Gestapo.
Right.
I know.
Yes.
It's 5:53.